There is a dark evil behind the Catholic Church. It hides itself behind grand cathedrals, fancy robes, and elaborate ceremonies. But underneath, there is a corruption so foul, its stench can no longer be ignored.
Just issued its report, it found evidence of more than 300 predator priests, all accused of sexually abusing
more than 1,000 victims.
They protected their institution at all costs.
Some very disturbing allegations made by one of his own archbishops.
The alleged cover-up involving Pennsylvania's clergy stretched all the way to the Vatican.
This church is a criminal enterprise.
In the past weeks, two stunning revelations have been made concerning how extensive the child abuse cover-up is within the Catholic Church. First, a 1,400-page grand jury report from Pennsylvania revealed the church knowingly protected 300 predator priests who had abused thousands of children. Then, Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano published a letter claiming the cover-up of abuse within the church reached all the way to the top and directly implicated the Pope himself. On Tuesday, August 14th, a grand jury in Pennsylvania revealed that Catholic priests had been abusing children and covering it up for decades. Some as young as 18 months old. Over 40 years, resulting in more than 1,000 victims. It was a coordinated effort among priests to silence victims and protect predators. The grand jury concluded that a succession of Catholic bishops and other church leaders shielded the church by not reporting child-abusing clergy to the police. Instead, they sent these pervert priests to so-called treatment facilities, which, according to the report, allowed hundreds of known child abusers to return to ministry. Think about that. Rather than allow them to face justice, the Catholic Church, by course of policy, deliberately protected these priests and moved them to other churches, where they were introduced to new, unwitting families and a fresh flock of trusting children. One pedophile priest, according to the New York Times report, finally agreed to step down after numerous complaints, but asked for and received a note of recommendation for his next choice of employment, Disneyland. Yes, the Catholic Church knowingly referred a child molester to work at Disneyland because, of course, they did. The truth is, there's no telling how large the true number of victims is because many never come forward. Abused children were marked with a cross so other priests would know the ones who had already been abused and were easy candidates, so to speak.
To make it easier to target their victims, the priests gave their favored boys gifts. Gold crosses to wear as necklaces. The crosses were markings of which boys had been groomed for abuse.
This is pure evil. Because of the statute of limitations, all but 2 of these pedophiles cannot be prosecuted despite still posing a threat to society.
The longer they covered it up, the less chance law enforcement could prosecute these predators because the statute of limitations would run. As a direct consequence of the systematic cover-up by senior church officials, almost every instance of child sexual abuse we found is too old to be prosecuted.
Some of these predators have raped hundreds of victims, hundreds of lives destroyed, and the church does everything in its power not only to shelter the abusers from justice, but to keep them in positions where the abuse can continue as long as possible.
Child abuse is not defined as a crime, but as a sin. What the crime is under canon law is to talk about it. We often hand out material to people, to families going into Catholic churches saying, you have to know that if your child is harmed here, the priest is under an obligation to the Pope to cover it up and not tell the police. I mean, what kind of organization could get away with having an official policy of aiding and abetting child rapists in their ranks?
A diabolical one.
Exactly.
But as terrifying as this is, it goes much deeper than the media will ever let on. This type of abuse is somehow ingrained in the priesthood itself, as if priests feel somehow entitled to this behavior. almost like some kind of sick sacrament. In fact, one victim practically said as much on a recent interview by Democracy Now!
I have to say that there has to be a part of the church that feels that that is their benevolent right of some kind. I really just, it's starting to seem like there is a percentage of the church that feels like it is their divine right to do this. It is so systemically huge.
South Park also hinted at a deeper connection between all of the sexual abuse cases in the Catholic Church. The priest and clergy feel as though it is part of the Catholic tradition to rape children.
Yes, we've got to stop these boys from going to the public. They've got to know to keep their mouths shut. Right. And so, well, wait a minute. What? It's okay, Father Maxey. We're all priests here. The doors are closed. Well, for the love of God, are you all saying that you have engaged in inappropriate relations with your altar boys? We are here to bring the light of God, not harm the innocent. I'm serious.
Father, having sex with boys is part of the Catholic priest's way of life.
Yeah.
Well, I was 40 years an insider in this church. I was 23 years in the religious life and 14 as a priest. And I knew what was going on the inside, and it was just abject corruption from the get-go. This church is a criminal enterprise that actually covers up the massive sexual abuse of children for centuries.
In an 11-page letter published Sunday, Vigano, the retired Vatican ambassador to the United States, called for the Pope to resign, claiming he told the pontiff in 2013 that Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, then Archbishop of D.C., was a serial predator, and that corruption and cover-up in the Catholic Church goes all the way to the top. I speak now because corruption has reached the top of the church hierarchy, Vigano said. He calls for the Pope to resign, saying Francis knowingly protected child abusers, claiming Francis knew McCarrick was a depraved serial predator, and not only did nothing about it, he gave him a coveted job as a Vatican envoy. 2 American archbishops have come forward and confirmed Vigano's accounts. This is him, McCarrick, the predator priest. He has since resigned but is still free, walking around, still likely a threat to society. How much more evidence do we need that this man is pure evil? The Pope has still not even addressed these accusations, as if ignoring them will make them go away. Another sickening aspect behind this is the money the Church pays out over these cases. Reportedly, the Vatican has spent over $4 billion to settle sexual abuse cases so far. That's coming from the nickels and dimes of the tithing faithful. The Vatican hoards untold wealth. The Pope flies around in a private jet, and yet he wants us to believe they care about the poor and starving. So when that collection plate comes around, you know your hard-earned money is doing great things. Compensating victims of the priests transferred from parish to parish so they can continue their predatory behavior, and paying lawyers to defend them. But there's a much darker aspect to all this that no one will mention: the connection to trauma-based mind control, aka MKUltra. MKUltra survivor and whistleblower Kathy O'Brien has spoken extensively about her abuse at the hands of perverted priests and her Catholic/Jesuit-based mind control.
Mine was horrific and horrendous, and it was based on what the Himmler research had learned about the effects of trauma on the human mind. It's what the Catholics had long since learned about effects of trauma on the human mind through the Spanish Inquisition and the kind of tortures that they were using back with the Crusades in the early days. They knew the effects of trauma on the human mind.
When we were in Italy,
with a translation of our book in Italy. It was a very pivotal time in Italy when the Catholic child abuse scandal was brought to light, and you realized that the abuse of the children was being used for mind control manipulation.
Don't forget that it was the infamous Catholic-run Boys Town in Nebraska that was heavily involved in the Franklin scandal in the 80s. Children from Boys Town were being used to blackmail prominent politicians.
But King used Boys Town not just as a source of young boys for his business, he prostituted them at sex and drug orgies. Paul Benassi was a victim of King's abuse. He was also sent by King to lure Boys Town youngsters off campus.
Larry King was one of the underlings of the CIA, involved in a specific program recruiting particularly young boys, particularly a particular kind of boy, who were then used in a kind of mental programming, brainwashing, if you would, that we were doing, to use them for such things as assassination, such things as drug dealing, things,
that sounds like
sex, blackmail, so on and so forth. And I believe, mind control thing. You know, like Manchurian Candidate. You remember that old movie where they?
Yeah.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is I think that is an integral part of this.
One piece of information hints at a satanic motive behind the abuse. The corrupt clergy are accused of conducting sacrilegious rituals that mock the Eucharist. This is a form of satanic rite known as a black mass, and typically involves depraved and disgusting acts such as eating feces to mock the body of Christ.
But see, this group has they have infiltrated many places. Look at the Catholic system and worldwide all the sex abuse cases. Guess what? They're not just sex abuse. When they go to the courts, they say leave the satanic side out, the black rooms out. Malachi Martin knew about this. William Kennedy knew about the black rooms inside the Catholic system. And we got to go back again to the rat lines. Many of the Nazi soldiers became fake priests and infiltrated.
Recently, identical priest abuse cases have come to light in Ireland and Chile that have destroyed thousands more lives. How long will we allow scandal after scandal to come out and continue to act like this is just a one-off? How many bad apples does it take before we realize the whole tree is rotten?
This is an old problem. And if you follow this problem to its foundation, it will lead you to the highest corridors of the Vatican.
It is time for this organization to be shut down for its centuries of crimes against humanity. The Vatican needs to be raided, its criminal syndicate of money laundering and child rape exposed. Instead of launching a massive internal investigation and turning over current abusers to the police, the Pope sits on his golden throne of lies while hundreds of thousands suffer.
The Pope has a bigger agenda. He's got to get on with other things of talking about the environment and protecting migrants and carrying on the work of the church. We're not going to go down a rabbit hole on this.
But the Pope poses a problem. According to canon law, the pontiff cannot be judged by any civil or religious authority. He is beyond the law.
It will be, I think, an important task to work out how to bring the Pope beneath the law by arguing either that the Vatican is not a real state or that the degree of his negligence over the child abuse scandal does involve him in a crime against humanity.
I truly feel we are living in a time of revealing, and no matter how hard these corrupt institutions try, they cannot stop their despicable deeds from coming to light. Not only in the Vatican, but in DC, Hollywood, and elsewhere.
The effects of sex abuse on a child are well documented. It can be horrific. Very simply, it can destroy a person. In the worst case, it can lead to suicide. What is really going on, to my mind, is that people like Father Brian McCoy, the head of the Jesuits, his Director of Professional Standards, Simon Davies, to a point, though it's not his job to have feelings, and nearly all the other Jesuits you can mention who are still living just don't know what they've done. They just don't know. They don't want to know. They don't really want to know the damage that their fellow Jesuits caused. And they don't want to know or face up to the fact that if they were there at the time, they were probably complicit in their silence. They are still complicit now in their silence, because the damage is just almost beyond understanding to those people. They won't let themselves feel it. They won't let themselves understand it, because it's just too bad. It's just too horrible. If they knew what their society had done to boys, to men, to human beings, they'd sell everything they own, every damn thing, and just start writing out cheques. How much do you want? Here. We really are sorry. I mean, we're not pretending this time. We really are sorry. As of September 2019, we know there were 24 known or alleged Jesuit sex offenders who were at Jesuit schools in Australia. There were also 7 lay teachers and 3 more who were not at Jesuit schools. And there are 5 reports of sex abuse by unknown persons during the 2000 to 2010 decade from the Jesuits' annual report. Strictly speaking, the word pedophile refers to someone attracted to prepubescent children. The word hebephile refers to someone attracted to postpubescent children under 16 years old. Pedophile is commonly used to mean both. In Victoria before 2014, there were not many specific sex offences against children. There are 3 classes of offender. The alleged offenders, those about whom there have been made very credible reports. Saying alleged is a legal precaution. The ones we talk about here, there is really no doubt at all that they were sex offenders. The second type are those who the Society of Jesus have paid compensation about. And the third type are those who have been convicted in court and jailed. There are quite a few alleged offenders still living. Some are under police investigation, a good number are not. This is a part of Brian McCoy's response to the Royal Commission.
But I think the 5th one is probably the most important one, that is responding to survivors. Ensuring that we listen to them, we take them seriously, we believe in the stories they tell, we keep good records for many years, which we didn't do in the past, but above all, we accompany them into the future. And that commitment of accompaniment is a very important value that the Royal Commission has reminded us of.
Being accompanied by the institution that is vicariously liable for the abuse seems not terribly attractive. It has overtones of Stockholm Syndrome. Out of frustration when encountering denial, obfuscation and lack of transparency, I've done a few things you might call activism. For example, going to Canisius College to try to speak to Peter Beer, handing out Noel Bradford information to the CLC members at the Anglecrest Anglesea House, handing out information to some Year 11, Year 12 students at the gates at Xavier College, and making available a document about sex abuse at the 2018 50-year reunion at Xavier College, and of course making a website. Because of these things, Father Brian McCoy has described me as obsessed, a danger to myself and others, and has said that I caused some Canisius College staff to have to go on stress leave, and that I abused people on retreat there, that I was authoritative and demanding while I was there. In a recent meeting I had with Brian McCoy, Simon Davies and Bill Doherty, they tried to make it about me, as in, there's nothing wrong with us, what's wrong with you? All three of them attacked me personally at some point. This is quite normal. You always try to discredit the complainant. It is very, very worrying that they think they are doing the right thing. There's none so blind as those who will not see. To my mind, Xavier was a constant series of abuse, both emotionally and physically. W. Marum, Richard Galbraith, John Roland Boylan, Tim Carter, Peter Quinn, Greg McLarkin, W. Keane, Victor Higgs, Stan Hogan, Brian Purcell, Paul Schultz, Michael O'Mahony, Larry Keane, Richard Lane, Brenton Lewis, Chelsea Romanen, Peter Kelly, James McInerney, David Rankin, Patrick O'Sullivan, Patrick J. Stevenson, a very well-known toucher of boys, aggressively handling their collarbones and fingers in class, causing pain, massaging boys' hands and knees in his room, sliding his hand up a boy's leg and under his shorts in his room, fondling boys' genitals over his clothes and with the boys' clothes down, genitals exposed, consummate networker, very much in the mould of Jimmy Savile, Rolf Harris and Michael Jackson. Noel Bradford, in amongst the boys as much as he could, coaching many sporting teams, being involved in other associations with boys, a well-known fondler of boys, hugging boys, lots of touching, finally admitted his assaults in writing in the 1990s, was eventually laicized, still believed living. Willie Kovac, a gym teacher at Burke Hall, Cosca Hall and at Xavier, well known for groping boys' genitals, taking boys on camps to Wilson's Promontory and getting them to go naked, taking a boy away by himself and getting him drunk overnight in a tent at Wilson's Promontory, sacked from Xavier in 1967 when finally a boy complained, encouraged by his father, went on to Marcelin College and kept abusing boys there, jailed after Marcelin College, kept abusing boys in St Kilda for years, finally convicted and put in jail, still believed living, in Ararat jail perhaps. He might be able to get to know George Pell. Eldon Hogan, alleged sex abuser at Xavier College in the early 1960s. After he left Xavier as a student, he came back to manage the cadets. He was given an office in the Great Hall. He developed a coterie of boys as his special friends. At Xavier College Maytime Fair in 1997, I think, he was under a car and the car, for some reason, rolled on him, causing serious injuries, and apparently he died there at the scene. Through the Eldon Hogan Trust, fellow Oldsverian and trustee Peter Walsh provided $4 million for the construction of the Performing Arts Centre, which looks like this, and a scholarship fund, money for restoration of the archives, an exhibition gallery and many other projects. The Trust also provides money for prizes annually, the Eldon Hogan Prize for Music, the Eldon Hogan Prize for Public Speaking, and the Eldon Hogan Perpetual Trophy for the student who best combines study and sport. So it makes you wonder how a student might feel when later on he finds out the prize he received is named after a sex abuser and the money also provided from the sex abuser's trust. So we have a building at Xavier College named after a sex abuser. We have his name on prizes given to students. The school and the Jesuits know about the allegations and they have done nothing about it at all because they would prefer to just take the money and forget about Eldon Hogan being an alleged sex abuser. Stevenson's name was removed from the sports centre as a pretense that they cared, but Stevenson did not have a trust. Stevenson did not keep providing money to school. Even now in 2019, the money coming from the trust is very important to the school. Lawrence Leonard S.J., currently living in Melbourne. He was at Riverview in the 1970s, at Xavier in 1990 and possibly before, a spiritual director for the younger boys, working with the other abuser, Victor Higgs. Old Xaverian Dennis Hart, Archbishop of Melbourne, appointed Leonard as chaplain to two groups, Courage and Encourage. They assist families who have gay family members on how not to be gay. If you have a problem with a gay family member, you can phone him 03 9854 8189. Theo Overberg, S.J., currently at the Jesuit Curia in Rome, Bordermaster at Riverview, 1970s. A group of 4 or 5 boys, one by one, to punish them, took them to his room, had them stripped naked, lie on his bed, face down. He hit them on the arse with his leather strap, perhaps 4 times, each in turn, and sent them back to the dormitory. Victor Higgs was at Riverview at the time. A boy who complained about Victor Higgs was sent to a master. The master had the boy drop his pants and hit the boy on the genitals with his strap. It sounds a bit like Overberg, said one ex-Riverview student. Henry Snedden, S.J., Burke Hall, 1969 to 76. Snedden would bring a boy to the front of the class, put the boy on his knees so the boy's face was very close to his genital area.
As a 10-year-old, I was commanded to kneel and had my face held pressed to a priest's genital region so tight that I had to breathe through the fabric of the material of the priest's trousers, which was rich with the stench of crayfish, which we ate at home on occasion. At the time I was effectively suffocated and feared for my life, but was frozen by fear and powerless to object. The aggressive way this was done and the guttural tone of the priest's voice was traumatic at the time, but not fully understood at that time. At that time I wanted to believe there was some religious purpose I did not yet understand about this. As I became more sexually aware, I was able to put this perverted behaviour into context, and the smell that I would never forget was instantly recognised again in the context of time.
Philip Wallbridge, believed still living, never investigated by police, educated at Xavier, a teacher at Burke Hall and Cosca Hall, a rector at Xavier, and also a teacher at St Aloysius, North Sydney. He got boys together in groups to masturbate with them. The student says he ran retreats or camps with boys, 4 boys of various ages, where they got drunk, sat around, on his instructions put their hands down their pants, touching themselves, while he encouraged them to talk about their sexual fantasies. He was removed from St Aloysius because of this, given a job at Jesuit headquarters in Melbourne for a couple of years. Then Billy Wren gave him a job as rector at Xavier, where he continued his masturbation groups. Another ex-student says he would select a group of boys to go on retreat with him to a rural property near Euroa. Alcohol would be consumed. Wallbridge would tell the boys that masturbation was normal and every male did it. Then he would encourage the boys to openly masturbate in view of him and the other boys, and Wallbridge would openly masturbate as well. As far as I know, there was no physical sexual contact with Wallbridge. I've heard other stories about Wallbridge going on holiday with boys on a houseboat on the Murray River and encouraging complete nudity and a lot of drinking and open masturbation. Peter Beer, S.J., Scholastic at Burke Hall, 1957-59, known for viciously strapping boys in class every day for the whole year, years on end while he was there. At Xavier College in 1969, after studying in the USA, he was senior bordermaster at Xavier College. He had groups of boys in his room. He would supply them with beer and cigarettes to smoke. A friend of mine told me that Beer had attempted to grope his genitals. Beer took 2 boys out to dinner on a Saturday night to a high-class restaurant, drank wine, took them to see the movie Romeo and Juliet, which has a sex scene between 2 underage people. Only 1 year at Xavier. He was then sent back to the USA for more study. Returned to Australia is now living at Kinesius House in Pymble in Sydney. He has a secretary. You can call him there if you'd like to speak to him. Pedophile is under investigation by the police. There are more serious allegations as well. John Byrne, a vicious, nasty, violent man. At Burke Hall, 1967 to 72. 1971, a boy aged 11 was viciously raped by Byrne. Nothing was done to Byrne. He was removed and given an office position. Joseph Craig at Cosca Hall for a very long time, well known to be touching boys. The Society of Jesus have settled complaints about Craig. The boy rejected Craig and was treated horribly by Craig. He was seen crouching in bushes, spying on what Willie Kovac was doing with boys. He masturbated a boy with toothpaste. In 1997, there were 3 perpetrators at Xavier College. Brendan Ellis was head of the school. Father Michael Stoney, SJ, was the principal, but not for Term 4. Mr. Chris McCabe was principal for Term 4. Brian O'Reilly would take a boy to his room and interrogate the boy about his sexual habits. Do you masturbate? Do you produce sperm? Do you like men? He did this for at least 5 years at Xavier College. He was dismissed in 1997 because one boy O'Reilly interrogated was connected to Paul Henderson, the headmaster at Burke Hall, who must have spoken to Brendan Ellis, and Brendan Ellis, having ignored previous reports about O'Reilly, this time was forced to sack him. O'Reilly went on to gain employment as a teacher. It's unclear, but after Xavier it looks like it was at another school. Then from about 2003, for about 15 years, he was a teacher at the Santa Maria Girls College in Northcote in Melbourne. The headmistress there, Deborah Barker, won't talk to me about Brian O'Reilly and his time at that school. Glenn Terence Walls, graphics teacher, 91 to 97 at Xavier College. In 1997, he was dismissed from Xavier for sexually assaulting a student. This was not his first offence there. A previous offence had been ignored. After 1 year, Walls was re-employed at Xavier in 1999. It is not known how much longer he stayed at Xavier, but he was charged by police with 2 counts of indecent assault of Xavier students from 1992 and 93. Also charged with the possession and production of child pornography. On the day of the hearing, the police prosecutor withdrew the indecent assault charges for some reason unknown. Walls was fined $750 without conviction for the possession of child pornography. Sometime after that, he gained employment as a lecturer at the Swinburne University of Technology in the Department of Communication Design and Digital Media. He's quite a well-known artist. In 1997, the senior board master was in a relationship with a Year 12 student. When his mother found out and complained to the school, she was told that if it became public, her son would suffer the humiliation of being known as gay, and other students would have their exam results affected. The school shut it down. They did nothing. These 3 things in 1997, as far as I know, Brendan Ellis has not reported them to police, as he is required to do. Mandatory reporting for principals and teachers began in 1994. But the questions asked by the priest in seeking to examine my right to an annulment seemed to want to know whether I had homosexual adventures with other students, also about whether I had had anal sex with my wife. Recently, in 2019, one survivor of abuse went to see the Jesuits about Philip Wallbridge. This man was told that because Wallbridge is no longer a Jesuit, no longer one of them, that there's nothing they can do about it, and they showed him the door. Another survivor lodging a complaint against a very well-known abuser, in the end was offered $50,000. $30,000 of that would have to pay the lawyers, and he'd be left enough to buy a second-hand car, perhaps a Toyota.
The eyes are not here. There are no eyes here. In this valley of dying stars, in this hollow valley, this broken jaw of our lost kingdoms.
This is a game I invented, which is a direct rip-off of Monopoly, of course. It's called PEDOPHILIA. It's pretty sick as an idea, but the idea of pedophile rings or pedophiles cooperating with each other is not far-fetched. It may not be disorganised, but it does happen. It has happened.
I also want to thank survivors who have come forward and those who have accompanied them for their courage, for their honesty, and helping us to face the truth of who we are and which we wish to become.
It's a curious two-handed game they play where they say they believe you and they also say they don't believe the alleged offender did it. It may be simply that the lawyers have told Brian McCoy never to admit anything about any Jesuit being a sex abuser.
To me, the most important focus ought to be on preventing abuse before it would otherwise occur.
So Professor Stephen Smallbone's concern is about the now, not about the past. He advised Father Brian McCoy that the naming of sex offenders would be a denial of natural justice, in the sense that the ones who are dead can't defend themselves. Brian McCoy readily accepted that, and that idea has completely died. The 6 North American Jesuit provinces have all published lists of credibly accused sex offenders, as have more than 50 dioceses in the USA. Not one diocese or institution in Australia has done anything like that. The reason for this is that they can still deny how many sex offenders were in their ranks. Brian McCoy can keep up the pretense that, in effect, there are only 3, that is, the Jesuits who have been convicted in court and put in jail. This dishonesty and defence of their institution is simply dishonest, and it's very much an indication of where they really stand on this pretense of being open and transparent. As of 2018, the Society had 15,842 members. It is the largest religious order in the Catholic Church. The estimated value of Jesuit properties in Australia is about $600 million. This includes other properties like Newman College at Melbourne University, the Jesuit Theological College in Parkville, and others as well. When I was going over the exam records in the Xaverian publication, the annual, and I noticed that in year 11, this very good friend of mine at school, he was a very bright kid and somewhat of a larrikin, a bit loud, always fun. In year 11, he failed every subject, when in the previous 2 years, being in the A class, he had very good results. A similar thing happened to myself in year 12 at Xavier. So that really rang alarm bells with me. I found out later on that this particular boy, who became a man, had a life mostly involving abuse of drugs, alcohol and heroin, and his death was premature. Was he sexually abused at Xavier College? We probably will never know, but the indications in a sense are there. And how many more are like that? How many more were abused that we never heard of? How many more also died early, young, had terrible lives, lives of trauma and suffering. In an horrific way, it's almost like the hollow men, the perpetrators, turn their victims into something resembling themselves. These men who have no heart, these men who have no soul, tear the hearts and souls out of their victims. They destroy them, make them into a likeness of themselves in a way. It's a shocking thing to envisage. But possibly That's what they like doing. Or when one is that frustrated by something or other, you lash out at what's available, and what is available to a priest in a school are the children, because they are vulnerable. And there's no problem with repercussions. You can simply get away with it. So it's a pretty easy solution for someone who contains that amount of anger, that amount of frustration, that amount of confusion about who they are and what they're doing. The many schools, retreat centres and parishes from Brisbane down to Adelaide have been used to move and hide sex offenders from scrutiny. They are suddenly moved without explanation, or possibly is explained as stress leave. If they are so bad they can't be trusted in another school, the retreat centres like Seven Hill and Canisius House are popular, or they are sent to parishes like Richmond or Toowong. Many are sent from school to school, but when they continue offending, they are taken out of circulation to a retreat centre or parish and hidden away from school children. During the period 1957 to 1997, there were 56 moves of sex offenders from Jesuit schools. This includes priests and brothers and laypersons, and some who were dismissed. J.R. Boylan, 1961 to 66, he moved 6 Jesuit priests. Peter Kelly, 67 to 72, he moved 11 Jesuits. Patrick O'Sullivan, 73 to 78, he moved 9 Jesuits. Paul Duffy, Provincial, 79 to 84, he moved 7 Jesuits. Peter Steele, 85 to 90, he moved 6 Jesuits. Bill Uren, 91 to 96, he moved 5 Jesuits. Davin Day, 1997 to 2002, he moved 3 Jesuits.
We have appointed the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Victoria, the Honourable Marilyn Warren, to undertake a review of the transfer of an ex-Jesuit, Victor Higgs, from one school to another in 1971.
She was educated at Gilbreda Catholic Girls' College in Mentone, Victoria. So it's no secret Higgs was moved from St Ignatius in Adelaide to St Ignatius Riverview 1970-71 because a boy told his mother about Higgs. His mother told the school, and the school, in cooperation with Peter Kelly, the Jesuit Provincial, moved Higgs up to St Ignatius Riverview. That's how it was done in those days, and still was done until at least the year 2000. You just get rid of the offender, and till the parents is all done, there's nothing to worry about. Brian McCoy says he's reviewed the available files and there's no indication Higgs was moved because of sex abuse. Marilyn Warren might find the files that are not available and make a different conclusion. This is the only inquiry that's ever been done into the movement of a Jesuit priest. As I said, there are 56 in total over the years. Ms. Warren's terms of reference allow her, if she wants to look into other things. I've told Nick Elias of Owen Dixon Chambers in Melbourne, her assistant, that all about the other moves that Peter Kelly made during his time as provincial. There are 9 other Jesuits that he moved. The Jesuit Provincial knows everything about what goes on at the school in terms of staff, so even if it's a lay person, the Provincial's informed about that. So will Ms. Warren investigate the other moves? And if she wants to, she can do the whole period from 1957 up to 1997 if she wants to. I think this is a test of her integrity, and it'll be interesting to see how she responds. So far it's been going on since December 2018. It's now September 2019. I wonder how much longer it's going to take.
Account of how I got involved in the rather scandalous matter of child sex abuse as pertains to Xavier and the Jesuits. So I began some inquiries, firstly through the internet, and I discovered at Burke Hall there were about 5 known or alleged sex abusers back in the 70s. I was interested in Burke Hall at that time because my brother attended that school at that time. John Byrne was well known. Paul Schultz was another. There was Willie Kovacs was active at that time. Bill Marham, and one other I can't even think of. So as I went on, more and more names of alleged abusers came up. I ended up developing a list which currently sits at 29 Jesuit abusers and 6 or 7 lay teachers. Not all of the 29 on my list were at Xavier, but the majority of them were. I found access to the Xavier annuals very, very useful. That is the yearbooks, and there are several books about the history of Xavier, which I also found helpful as I was tracking where different parties were at different times as they moved through from one institution to another. It seemed to me that the knowledge of all of this stuff was largely hidden, and I think probably, whether conscious or not, it's meant to stay that way for a whole lot of reasons. But the knowledge is out there. It's just the whole story is not in anyone's head. There's little bits of it in lots of head. The percentage or incidence of this phenomenon within the confines of the Jesuits actually reflects about the average of what the statistics that the Royal Commission came up with in regard to the Catholic Church nationally. I became aware that the school was planning a memorial stone, and I understood that this memorial rock was a condition of a settlement with one particular victim. On that day, I remember speaking to one of the ex-provincials of the Jesuits, Stephen Curtin. He asked me what was my interest in this subject. I imagine he probably thought I was a survivor or knew somebody who was a survivor, and I said to him, my interest in this subject is that I want to know what happened here in regard to the extent and the severity of abuse or harm done to these innocent boys. I want to know what happened, and when I'm satisfied that I know what happened, I want to know what you're going to do about it. So I put it fairly bluntly to him, and he said, oh, very good. He smiled a little bit wryly and said he would pass on that information to the current provincial, who was Brian McCoy. I doubt if he did that, because I didn't hear back from Brian McCoy or from Stephen Curtin, and I continued my inquiries. And I began to wonder what indeed the Jesuits were doing about this, and Tim McDermott and I made several representations to Simon Davies, who acts really as the second-hand man to the provincial, and so we made several representations to him. One issue we discussed was the publication of names. I presented the provincial and Simon Davies with a list of names. That idea was rejected. I estimated, again using some metrics derived from the Royal Commission statistics and other studies around the world, rough metrics suggested to me if there were 29 Jesuit abusers, there might well be something of the order of 1,500 to 3,000 victims. And my question to the Jesuits was, what were they doing about that? So their response was essentially that they were doing nothing about that other than waiting for a complaint to come forward. And then they had a process of dealing with that complaint. I saw that process in action, and I formed the view that trying to deal with these problems in-house was not satisfactory, and we need to find a more compassionate and understanding and fair method of dealing with complaints when they come forward. It's been observed by quite a number of survivors who have come forward and been subjected to this sort of process, that they felt victimised, again, re-victimised. Well, the outcome I would like to see really is, and I think, you know, it's hard to understand why this just wouldn't be obvious. It's almost so obvious, it's hardly worth saying. It's like saying water's wet. But the outcome that I'm seeking would be that every potential survivor of sexual and physical abuse that went through the doors of Cosca and Birkhall and Xavier would be contacted by the province, would be informed, where appropriate, of the persons who may have known to them who have abused others, who may have abused them, and that all of those potential survivors would be given an opportunity to come forward in a safe, sympathetic and understanding fashion, and all of them would receive, for want of a better word, justice. That justice would comprise of complete acknowledgement, complete transparency on the part of the Jesuits of the problem, and as it has occurred under their auspices, and then appropriate compensation or assistance, in whatever form that may take. And I think only then could the Jesuits say, well, we've faced up to the problem. The question now is, will the Jesuits, or the question for the Jesuits is, will they step up, take responsibility for these historical cases and compensate the innocent boys, now men who suffered through no fault of their own, and do so in a timely fashion, because time is running out.
The very hard thing to understand, at least to me, is what I perceive and I suppose experience as well with the Jesuits I've spoken to, they're not too many, and associated persons, is the lack of what I would call real compassion. Actually getting the feeling that the person you're talking to really does care about it. I haven't actually encountered that yet. When you speak to them, it seems to be not there. But this lack of genuine compassion, the one thing that really does teach compassion, the one thing that makes someone understand other people, is suffering. If you don't understand suffering, you cannot know, and you cannot understand, you cannot experience compassion. You just can't. Teresa of Avila, who wrote, "The heart receives, it knows not how or whence, a blow from a fiery dart. In the very depths and centre of the soul, this resembles the pains of purgatory. The spiritual torments are so much more keen that the bodily ones remain unnoticed. St. John of the Cross says, 'How gently and lovingly you wake my heart, where in secret you dwell alone, and in your sweet breathing, filled with good and glory, how tenderly you swell my heart with love.'" It has been confirmed from a recent meeting that the archives at Xavier and at other schools, and most likely at all Jesuit places, are now considered private resource. Previously, Simon Davies said that the archives were all open and that there are no secrets. That is not true any longer. The only information you can get is very direct personal information about yourself, like your exam results. A simple photograph or a staff list, for example, will not be given to you. The reason for this is not explained, but obviously they are trying to stymie anyone who wants information to assist their memory or to make a complaint against them. Simon Davies says that they do provide comprehensive information to survivors when they have a lawyer. What he means is that to get comprehensive information, you need to start a legal action and you need your lawyer to make a proper request for discovery. The Society of Jesus, like any other institution or person, has a legal obligation to supply that information. It is not from the goodness of their own hearts. This is what I call the sounds of silence. People who've been asked to say something and won't. Retired lay teacher Graham Sharp, retired lay teacher Paul Henderson, old Severian ex-politician Pat McNamara, ex-Jesuit provincial Davin Day, ex-Jesuit provincial Steve Curtin, ex-teacher at Burke Hall Michael Head, Tony Noonan, chair of the Xavier board, did respond to an email that subsequently went quiet. Old Severian Rob Hulse, old Severian Bill Shorten, old Severian ex-politician Peter McGorran, old Severian and journalist Gerard Henderson, Professor Stephen Smallbone on the Jesuit advisory panel, responded once then went quiet. Ex-Jesuit priest Peter Norden says a few things but nothing much. Old Severian Santo Chiloro, well-known Jesuit journalist Michael Kelly, old Severian Dr. John Bopper, old Severian and politician Dan Tehan, a Jesuit-educated politician Kevin Andrews, very concerned but no action. Bill Uren, current rector at Newman College, Melbourne University, was provincial 91 to 96. He spoke with me. He said he knew of no sex abuse by any Jesuit until he became provincial and received complaints. When he became provincial, Philip Warbridge was at Jesuit headquarters. After a while, Bill Uren placed Warbridge into Xavier as the rector there. Bill says that he had no knowledge of Warbridge's prior offences. Andrew Hamilton, SJ, who is quite well known, he writes obituaries for dead Jesuits in their biography books. He is a good example of what you get if you manage to speak to a Jesuit person. There is an organisation called Christian Life Community, which is a lay organisation sponsored by the Jesuits. Andrew Hamilton is the current chaplain. Noel Bradford was the original creator of that community. So I did ask Andrew Hamilton when I met him if he would tell the members of CLC that their founder was a known and a self-admitted child sex abuser. He said he wouldn't do that because he did not want to upset them. Now, this is the sort of cowardice you come across quite often. Andrew Hamilton was at Xavier as a scholastic in 1966-67. When asked about his time there, he said he was sorry for scrapping boys so hard or something, but also denied any knowledge whatsoever of any sex abuse taking place at Xavier College. It's very strange that no Jesuit or lay teacher at Xavier College has ever said that they knew anything about any sex abuse at Xavier College.
It's hard to talk about this and stay on track. It's very complex and very emotional. So I'll read to you something I prepared that gives you a glimpse of what I feel. In 1974, I was a 10-year-old boy when I entered the gates of Burke Hall. Before that day, I was a happy, normal, well-adjusted kid, expected to have a bright future. From day one, it was the darkest period of my life, and those formative years from age 10 to 15 did me only harm and would later prevent me from reaching my true life potential. For the rest of my life, I would relive in vivid detail the horrific events I lived through almost on a daily basis. A wooden ruler, a heavy book slammed shut, the smell of seafood, or anyone shouting could trigger me to relive certain moments all over again. I could not function as a student during that time and could not keep a job after school as a result. All people of the Catholic faith at that time were convinced that a priest could not and would not do wrong. It was a time of discipline and corporal punishment. I was playing with a tennis ball one day which rolled onto a forbidden grass boundary, but still within reach of my feet on the right side of the boundary. As I bent to retrieve the ball, I was knocked to the ground by the headmaster of the day, who had hit me with a cricket bat and fractured my pelvis. He was gone from the school when I returned after my recovery with no explanation or any apology for the injury I sustained. I had no pleasant memory of any day from my experience at Burke Hall and Xavier. I can say that I have a detailed memory of many traumatic things that were done to me by more than one priest. History is now in the process of being rewritten to show the many barbaric and perverted acts by Jesuit priests all over the world. My natural distaste for prayer and anything to do with Catholicism as a result of my treatment left me without parental support. Their loyalty to the sanctity and piety of priesthood overpowered their maternal and paternal instincts. We will never know the true numbers of abuse victims, as many have suicided. These were just 2 campuses owned by the Society of Jesus. There were many all over the world. There were many all over Australia.
This is the plaque on the rock at Xavier College, a memorial to historical sex abuse. It was placed there in cooperation with some survivors. It says, Xavier College acknowledges that some students have suffered harm and abuse in their time at our school. The college acknowledges its past failures in this regard. To those whose experiences have been painful, we offer an apology. May those who have experienced pain and hurt in the past now find recognition, healing and peace. And a quote from John 10:10, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. A very strange quote to finish with.
Our dried voices when we whisper together are quiet and meaningless as wind in dry grass. Between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow. Life is very long, between the desire and the spasm, between the potency and the existence, between the essence and the descent, falls the shadow. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper.
When I close my eyes, I cannot see you, yet I can feel you. I don't want to know you, yet you are there. When I close my eyes, the sun still rises and I feel its warmth. The world and my weight turn to less than air when I close my eyes. But if I look at you, the fear goes through me. Feelings turn to stone. You are with me, miles away, yet when I close my eyes, the universe outside exists within my dissipation, and you are not there, and I am not here when I close my eyes. The stream from the void flows through this space. occupied by the thoughts which create us. Stop. The stream is nothing like us, and is everything.